brought me sprinkle cookies.
So what, no fucking TV now?
Hey!
Maybe she's from Jersey.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Maybe She's from Jersey. Obviously, Leo is also joining us today as he is very disruptive. So if you haven't already noticed, these are the people I hired to pose as my parents. I'm just kidding.
We'll send you guys our invoices later.
These are my actual parents, which is relevant to this episode because they're both adopted. So this episode is based on adoption. Their stories are pretty cool. They're very different and they were raised differently. Ironically, both, I guess, born in Manhattan, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are the odds?
Everybody who was adopted was born in Manhattan. So,
Oh my God.
yeah.
But aside from that, we also got food, obviously.
Yes. We went today by the thanks of Alex's parents, so thank you, to Caesar's Bagels.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I had the strong urge to say Caesar's Palace, and I'm not a gambler, so I don't know why that was my attention. But great bagels, literally so good, so toasty. It's like the perfect amount of crisp and
I'm gonna try mine.
Dough?
Dough. Mine's a bacon and egg on a bagel.
I got an egg everything bagel with pork roll, egg, and cheese. The best hangover cure, even though I'm not hungover. What'd you guys get?
A garlic bagel with cream cheese.
Are you currently eating it?
I am.
Okay.
I got the ghost bagel, extra toast.
We're sharing. He already ate.
Sharing.
Yeah, he didn't get the memo.
Extra toast.
So yeah, honestly, this is our go-to place. It's in Hamilton or Mercerville. I don't know. It's not far from us. Really good. My mom was literally saying there was a line out the door. Highly recommend. And I'm pretty sure they do like sandwiches as well.
They do. They have trays. It looks like. Yeah.
So anyway, moving on. This episode, again, like I said, is going to be about like their adoption stories. I think it's pretty cool and interesting to hear about. And they're my parents. That says something, you know?
Yeah. Very cool.
So do you guys want to introduce yourself like really quickly?
You go first.
Sure, I'm Alex's dad.
That's what he says. It's on his birth certificate. Alex's dad.
Yeah, no, I'm Dave, for those of you who don't know me.
He's also SuperDave. He is an iconic character in Hamilton. He literally has quite the groupie following. Yeah, so his karaoke DJ name, SuperDave.
Love it.
I'm blessed to have a lot of people who
Big
say
supporters.
that they actually know me. And
Yeah. People, I love telling this, but like I'll go out and it comes up in conversation somewhere and I'm like, oh yeah, that's my dad. And they're like, SuperDave's your dad? I'm like, I'm supposed to be the cool one.
Oh my God.
she
Or
hates
people
the
would
fact that
text
most
you.
of her friends come to my show.
Yeah.
He said they would text you and be like, oh, I'm going to karaoke. You're like, my dad's karaoke?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is weird too because like when I was like newly 21 and like trying out different bars in my town, like we would always have like a bar for a few months and then go to another bar for a few months. So I didn't get around to all of them quickly. So after like I was turning 22, let's say, and I was at like the new bar to go to and I was meeting new people and the bartenders and they were talking about SuperDave and I'm like, are they fucking talking about my dad? And like I would almost not say anything for a little bit just to hear what they had to say. And then like the second it was like, I don't know, I guess relevant or I was drunk enough, it'd be like, that's my dad.
He's always been cool, even in high school.
Which is how we're going to start this episode, right? So
Oh, wait,
we're going
before
to...
we start that, I do want to say that I have a lot of singers at my shows, but not the celebrities sitting at the end of this table.
Right.
Has yet to come to one of my karaoke
I never
shows
got
to
the
sing.
invite.
Oh, it's open. It's open.
Great to know.
It's an open casting call.
Great. I'll be there. Love karaoke.
So yeah, I guess like, you know, we'll jump in. I think what's best is we can start how you guys met and your own adoption conversation, how that started, and then we'll backtrack.
Okay.
Good.
So-
Our stories are somewhat different, so.
Why
For the
don't
s-
you
for the
each
same-
tell it? So maybe Dad should tell his side first.
Of how we met?
Yeah, and then you
okay.
can tell your side.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess to condense the beginning.
Yeah, we'll go backwards at some point, but you were...
I was I was visiting a drug rehab for a year and a half or
Visiting
two.
for fun.
And,
Visiting, yeah.
just taking notes. And it was the day before my 21st birthday, which says enough right there. And I was at Manalapan High School. We were doing a Don't Do Drugs seminar for the
Program.
The DARE
Yeah.
program?
No, it's similar though. It was directly related to the rehab.
Yeah.
And shout out to Discovery House. So we were talking to all the English and history, I guess, classes. Risa was in one of them. I actually remember where she was sitting, what she was wearing.
He's gonna
weird.
cry. He's literally such a crier.
I am not gonna be a tissue. Which is not weird. It's just kind of special. So after, and I had my head shaved because I got in trouble, and
Leo.
I looked like a skinhead. I really did. And so after we were done and the class is leaving and we're standing there, my future wife comes up to me and says, "Hi, I was adopted and I don't feel at all the same way you did." And so it was the beginning to our wonderful relationship, her disagreeing with me.
How did you respond? Were you like, okay?
I said, "God, you're gorgeous." No. I really don't remember what I said. It probably, I don't know. Do you remember?
You were thrown off. You were just like,
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm used to handing out autographs and,
I don't think you really had a response other than you were surprised and said, "Oh, well, I'd like to hear about your experience being adopted, or like how it affected you, or something general." You were just kind of thrown back by
I
it.
do remember we spoke, you had said how you felt when you were being brought up.
Yeah, I was just kind of calling bullshit on you, blaming your
think
drug
you actually said that,
addiction
too.
to you being adopted. I was just like, what?
I used the adoption as, I guess I was blaming it for some of the bad choices in my life, which I'm sure it had some kind of.
I'm sure it did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I think this episode is very interesting, because you guys have such different stories.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
Okay, so let's just start from the beginning then. So tell us each about your adoption stories. So just for brief backgrounds, because we're not going to really dive into this part, but they both have been in contact with their biological mother, so they do have a little bit more context of what had happened prior to getting in contact with their bio moms. It was just speculation on what their adopted parents had told them, which can always get like lost in context and communication and maybe just like reality.
Or purposely changed in some.
Yeah. So someone can go first about like your adoption.
I could go
stories.
first.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I was born in 1968.
Wait, did you introduce yourself?
I'm Risa Curtis, Alex's mom. Anyway, so I was born in 1968 in Manhattan. My biological mom, my adoptive parents were told was 16 years old, and she came from Long Island, and her family already had a young child. My biological grandmother had a 4-year-old son, and they had decided that it just didn't make sense for them to raise another baby, and they told their daughter that she had to give me up for adoption. It just happened to be that my mom's gynecologist, I guess, was the same gynecologist that Jacqueline's family used. There was some sort of connection. I'm not really sure how, but there
Jacqueline's
was.
your bio mom.
And
I think they picked that up.
oh, sorry, Jacqueline is my bio mom, and so they put 2 lawyers together and the doctor and the adoption. It was a private adoption that was made. I was born in a private hospital in Manhattan, and then we lived in the Bronx. And after 6 months, the adoption was official, and I was happy from there. I really didn't know I was adopted until I was 4. At 4 years old, my parents read me a book called Where Do Babies Come From? And it was very basic. I'm sure it's still around.
What a book.
Yes. But compared to the way they teach things now, it was very basic. And I remember them talking about seeds, that baby come from a seed, and for the longest time I couldn't eat tomatoes or cucumbers because they had seeds.
Oh my gosh.
And then after they read that book to me, immediately following, they read a book called Why Was I Adopted? And because I knew where babies came from, I could somewhat understand the adoption story. And they just explained to me how special I was, that, my biological mom got pregnant, she was young, and she couldn't take care of me. And she wanted me to be with a family that could, that she loved me so much that she made the ultimate sacrifice, and that they were lucky enough to adopt me, and that I was their daughter. And that's
cute.
just the way I saw it. I never saw it any other way. And I felt like they were my parents.
All right. So, happy story.
Yeah.
Cute. All right, Dad. Let's hear your...
Dun, dun, dun.
His is not that dark and sinister.
No, it's not.
She's calling bullshit.
I was born in 1964 in Manhattan at the New York Hospital. I, on the other hand, was not a private adoption. I was a public, or I guess, Spence Chapin adoption agency. So it was...
You were in foster care, right?
Yeah, well, I'm sure it was part of the system for Spence Chapin. So similar, my bio mom gave me up because she, at the time in her life, felt like she was not able to take care of me as a one-parent family. The way she'd want me to be brought up, whether it be monetarily or just, the household circumstances, whatever.
Do you feel comfortable telling the backstory or no?
For
Her? Like, wasn't she a stewardess and like...
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
She was a stewardess. As a matter of fact, she was working for Eastern Airlines at the time.
Is that even a thing?
It's not anymore.
Oh.
Yeah. She, I believe, and of course, it changes as I remember it, but I believe she was working for them for probably a year and a half, 2 years. And back in those days, you weren't allowed to have a boyfriend. It was just, they were so strict on what you wore, how you, took care of yourself, all that.
Stewardesses were like icons.
Right.
They were coveted.
Yeah, and they were also held demanded to do certain
different
things.
standards,
So
yeah.
so she, all right, so this gets tricky. She ended up obviously doing the deed with my dad, who turns out she ended up marrying for 6 months, 6 years later.
And he was an airline mechanic, right?
He worked for the Navy. He was in the Navy, and I believe he was an airline mechanic. Yeah, and a lot of so my mom did not know that she was pregnant by him. She thought actually she was pregnant by somebody else, and it was not a very nice exchange. So when I did finally get to speak with her, it was she was happy to know that it wasn't that exchange that I.
How did she know that?
I told her. Oh, how did she feel? She.
No, like how did she know you weren't from the one
He
guy?
told her.
I told her.
Ancestry.
Because, I found my mom through my father's side of the family.
Got it.
Right. So, so after after the adoption, well, because she was working for the airline, she had to do this secretive. So she took a leave of absence. Her boss, her direct boss, knew what was going on but couldn't say anything. And in order to keep her job, she had to do this like this. So she lived in Memphis, Tennessee, about 3 miles from Graceland, where she still lives. And so she came up north to New York to give birth to me and take care of the whole adoption. So I was adopted from New York into New Jersey.
But you were in foster care for 8 months.
I was, when I was about 8.5, 9 months old.
And how did Mimi find you?
Well, they were looking for a child. My Mimi is my adopted mom, and my dad.
Her name's Rosalie, but she's
Rosalie
my Mimi.
and Tom, right? Rosalie and Thomas are my dad's adopted parents, no longer with us in physical form.
Oh yeah, they're right there.
Yeah, they're here listening.
Yeah.
So they had their first child, my brother Jonathan, who's 6 years older than I. And apparently they tried to have more kids, and Mimi went through 3 or 4 miscarriages and was told she was no longer able to have kids. So they went the adoption route. I guess through Spence Chapin, however that was connected, came to visit me. They apparently, first sight, knew that I was the one they wanted to adopt. And finally, I guess everything went through. So I was now the second child in a family. And it turns out 4 years later, my mother got pregnant with my younger sister, Nina, and then my younger sister, Tara, 2 years after that. So,
Shout out to Aunt Nina who watches
Yes.
this.
Wow.
yeah. And so Nina was actually closer to me than in age than any of the other children. She was only 4 years younger than me, but she was a girl, and
Right.
it was, you know, as I'm growing up,
It's like me and Tommy.
she was also my dad's favorite. So
She was a daddy's girl, like you're a daddy's girl.
I was going to say, we have that in common.
yes, you do. So growing up was a little different for me than I guess for Risa, because even not being adopted, I would have felt the way I felt.
You were the only one adopted versus
Right.
mom.
I had an
sister.
adopted sister.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right. So you grew up with adoption, and I was the odd man out. Or
Right.
You didn't look like anybody.
No, well, there was a lot of things that were different. At the age of 13, I towered over everybody in my family.
How old were you when they told you were adopted?
Now, this is a great story. There's a lot of nightmares as to how people find out if they
Right.
ever do.
Right.
You know, some people hide it, some people don't.
I used to tell Tommy he was adopted for like a minute.
Oh, I told Raquel every single day when I was younger, because she was pale and everyone in my family wasn't. I'd bring her into the living room and I'd show her pictures of the family and I'd be like, "You don't look like anyone else." I was like, "You're
So
adopted."
mean.
Her sister's older.
That's great.
Yeah, I was a demon
Oh, she's
child.
older.
She
Nice.
bullied her older sister.
I was a demon child. I was really bad, but anyway.
So I think when my mother was pregnant with Nina, clearly showing, I had asked in some way, you know,
What the heck?
yeah, what's going on
She
here?
said you were on your way home from church and you were in the car.
Oh, is that what
and
it is?
you
Yeah.
asked her,
So obviously I knew that my baby sister was coming, and she goes, "That's where, you know, babies come from." And I said, "Did I come from there?" And I think she said that she took a second, but she looked at me and said, "No, you came from my heart."
And he was like, okay.
We should get tissues for Dad. 'cause
So
he's
now I'm
gonna
gonna
lose
cry.
it.
No.
Oh my god.
So that's
And you
the
were like,
best-
that was a big bubble. I don't know.
Oh my god.
Well, that's the I mean, how else? There's no better
Yeah.
way to
Yeah.
say, you know, because she and growing up, she always said, "We came and picked you out."
Yeah.
Right.
So
Almost
I
to
always-
make you feel special.
I always
Yeah.
did feel like I was chosen.
Yeah.
Right.
You
That's
know,
a
so-
beautiful way to look
Yeah.
at it.
So, but yeah. So,
How old were you when that happened?
8.5 months,
Okay.
9 months. Well,
No.
and then
when you
I
were-
was probably
4 when that conversation
Yeah,
happened.
because Nina's 4 years younger than you.
yeah. So I was probably 3.5
Okay.
because she wasn't born yet.
Did you like understand? And I guess for Risa, you too. Did you understand what they meant when they were telling you those things, or like?
In a basic way. I mean, I guess enough at that age that it made enough sense to be like, okay, and not ask a lot of questions. And then
Gotcha.
I feel like for both of us, our parents progressed that conversation as it was relevant as we grew up.
Yeah, I
makes
don't think
sense.
I remember the actual event at 3.5. I'm sure
But
that
Mimi did,
we
obviously.
talked
She remembered
the
it,
story
yes.
you know,
Right.
many times after. So
Right.
eventually it just became what I think would be a memory, but it's probably
So let me ask you this then, just from not. I didn't grow up with parents who were adopted, or really a lot of people around me. So I'm curious, do you think that, say you adopted children, would you tell them early on like your parents did? Or would you tell them when they're like 13, 14 years old? Because I feel like that could be really scary.
That's a
thinking
controversial-
something your whole life and then being like 15 and being like, by the way, you know what I mean? So what is your opinion on that?
Well, I think for me, it's very different because right now everybody can check their DNA.
True.
And nothing's a secret.
Right,
When
that's
we
true.
were when that happened when we were young, there was never a thought that your child would be able to find out that you weren't related to them unless they were sick.
Right.
And there was some sort of blood test that
Yeah.
came along. So I think it was more secretive back then and it wasn't as acceptable. But I think if we had adopted a child, we definitely would have told the child probably around the same time that we learned in basic terms. So it's not scary. You don't feel like you don't belong.
Right.
More like you're special, but you know, you weren't inside of me. But like your mom said, you came from my heart.
That is a beautiful way to put it.
I'm not sure that we would have brought it up. I think we would have waited for the child to give us some kind of a cue to give them that information. Otherwise, it's like, hey, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. When they're asking about babies.
Yeah.
And things.
Mom, I want mac and cheese. Well, you're adopted.
That's right.
So you can't have mac and cheese.
For right now, just tell us a little bit about your childhood plainly, not necessarily adoption related. Just give us a little brief background, where you grew up, your siblings, how you were raised, like stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I grew up, we moved to the suburbs out of the Bronx when I was 2.5, 3, and I had a very normal childhood. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad went to New York and Manhattan. I had a best friend. My sister was 5 years younger than me, so we really didn't play together, but she was a cute little baby that I would show off to everybody and take for walks. It's true. Stacy would attest to that. I used to make her feel jealous. It's awful. I did that. I don't know why. But.
She's like, this is my baby.
Yeah. My mom was very close to her family. So we spent a lot of time with her family. And I never thought of them as like, oh, I'm the adopted one. Like, they were my grandparents, my Grammy and Poppy. And these were my uncles and my aunts and my cousins. It was never, ever a question that I was different. On my dad's side of the family, we saw them on a regular basis, but we weren't as close to them. My mom tells the story that my grandma did not want me to call her grandma at first because she was upset. She blamed my mom for them not being able to have children. Mm-hmm. And basically my mom said, well, if she's not going to call you grandma, then you're never going to see her. So that changed quickly. And I had a great relationship with her as well. She was just different. We didn't see them as much. And they still lived in the Bronx for a very long time. And my other grandparents moved to Rockland County, New York. And then everything was fine. Like, I just had great relationships with everybody in the family. And
a normal childhood.
It was very normal. I mean, I can't think of anything that I was like, that happened because I was adopted. If it did, I didn't attribute it to that.
Right. She also was a tap dancer for a minute.
I was.
Oh,
I tap danced for
fun.
7 years.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, for 7 years.
When I started dance, which was like 9 or 10, she was like, you're going to do tap. And I was like, relax. I'm doing jazz. I'm like, we're going to start easy. I'm going to do some jazz.
Well, I started young. My mom put me in dance when I was like 4. But I loved it. But
Well, they had to pay for you somehow. So.
they had to pay for me some. Yeah, I mean, and I didn't necessarily look like my family either. They were, I'm not short. I'm pretty average,
You're
maybe
5'6".
a little tall for, always had like a slim build. And my mom's family was short and struggled with weight. My mom always was thin because she constantly was conscientious of it. My dad's family, they were darker, like hair and skin like me, but. So I guess people if they would have looked at us, they would have said, oh, you look like your dad. Mm-hmm. But really, I didn't necessarily look like either one, but I didn't stand out. I wasn't like blonde hair, blue eyed, and they were, dark hair, darker. My mom had blue eyes, so it could have gone anyway. But yeah, because everything just fit. I never felt odd. It was a good experience.
I think a good way to describe when I see pictures of them, because I actually did like a video montage for my Pop-Pop's birthday recently, and it was funny because when you're looking at all the pictures, I'm like, you guys look like the iconic New York Jewish family.
In the 80s,
Yeah.
70s and 80s.
I'm like, look at you being a little Jew girl and Jew boys over here. Like,
Yes, we were raised very differently religiously.
Yeah.
I was not brought up religiously. Holidays were more about getting together with family. We would go to temple for like the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which were long services. And for someone that was not religious and didn't go to temple, it was just kind of like, why are we here?
Awful.
Like, it was what we celebrated, like Hanukkah, like the fun things. And to me, religious holidays were more about just being with family. My sister did go to Hebrew school and have a bat mitzvah, but I did not. And Dave grew up completely different in a religious Christian family, which he'll talk to you about. So,
nice. Go ahead.
You got 4 hours. Okay, so for my childhood, very different than Risa's. Although we were upper middle class. Upper middle class.
Yeah.
But, we were middle class and we grew to upper middle
because
class.
he grew up in Hunterdon County, which is a very nice area.
It's very affluent, even more so now than it was at the time. Although the beginning, I was raised in Manville, New Jersey. So
you were like 7.
Yeah. We lived in Manville, and then my dad helped build the house that we moved into in White House Station, which is Hunterdon County. So we went from your suburb to a very rural area. We had 3 3/4 acres.
The house is beautiful. It's right down the street from my job, and every Father's Day we visit it. And the people that live there were like, "Hey, remember us? Can we just like walk through the backyard again?"
We did
and my
that
dad's
the
like,
first
"I
year.
built that."
First year of COVID, we knocked on the door and said, "Look, I don't want to bother you, but can we just look around? I was raised here." You know.
Wow.
My dad's like, "I built that. I built
Yeah.
that. I built that. I planted that."
So to plant a tree that's a foot high, to see it now at 30 feet, it's pretty
Or like
amazing.
the blueberry bushes. And
Yeah. So, again, being raised with one child already as my older brother, and then having the other 2 come along, I didn't always feel out of place, but there were a lot of things that would stand out. For instance, like Risa said, you could have easily thought that she was part of the family. My dad, my mom, both of my sisters and my brother all had darker. Well, actually, Tara, my youngest sister, had like a strawberry blonde hair. Otherwise, it was darker auburn or brown hair. And here I am,
With dark
blonde
eyes.
as yes, with dark eyes. I was born with platinum hair.
Yeah. Wow.
So not even blonde, but that almost whitish.
yeah.
And stayed that way for the longest, right up until I guess I was way over 20 something. So looking different at
Yeah.
12 or 13, I was now 5 foot.
And wait, I have to say you have gorgeous green eyes, which I hoped Alyx would get, but she didn't.
I really disappointed her there.
Yeah, what happened?
Oh my god.
You didn't choose the green eyes.
My bad.
So when I was about 12 or 13, I now had exceeded the height of everybody in my family. Now,
Yeah.
growing up, it was a little bit easy on the side of adoption because on my dad's side of the family, his sister, I guess, either couldn't have children or chose not to. She chose to adopt. So I actually have a cousin named Darren who's adopted. He's a couple of years younger than me. So I always knew that there was somebody else that we had a connection.
That's cool.
And then she also adopted, my Uncle Bob and Aunt Diane adopted a girl, Belinda, who's no longer with us. So now there's 2 of them. And then they adopted more.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I don't know the names because we kind of got disconnected. But so I always knew there was other people in the family who were adopted. So I didn't feel totally out of place. And when we went there, I would kind of,
Yeah.
gravitate towards them. But at home, I always knew that, there was a big difference between us. So it's pretty much.
Like, were you involved in things with your family? Like, did you guys do things together? Religion, sports? Were you close with your siblings?
We had, I was close with everybody, I think.
Like, what was your, what was the character of your family?
Our family, at the time, there was a lot of things going on. The first thing, when I was 12 years old, I'm going to jump to that.
I think this is a big part of why you blame. This is part of it.
Maybe.
Yes.
My youngest sister, Tara, who is 6 years younger than me, was diagnosed with leukemia. So Tara and I became very close because my brother, Jonathan, was at this point 18, and he had already had a wife and
Had
a
a baby.
child.
Whoa.
They had a little shotgun wedding thing going on.
Yeah.
Classy.
And so I'll get into the religious part too, which is very fun. But so
And
that
Nina was 4 years older than you and off doing her own thing.
she's a girl. She's 4 years younger.
Younger.
And so I was the person who did everything around the house. And my dad could not sit still. He just was always involved in some kind of
Well, that's
project.
you. Holy
it is me
mackerel.
now. It's me now. Back then it was entirely different because I didn't want to be part of it. But he couldn't do anything small. Wow, I don't know how to say this. We grew everything you could possibly grow in New Jersey, and some things you couldn't. We raised just about everything, chicken,
Chinchillas.
we had a cow, we had chinchillas, so we didn't have 10 chinchilla. They raised them actually for the furs. We had 390 chinchilla, and we built a barn actually for them.
That's still there.
My dad was in construction, and so he knew everything about construction, and later started his own business with drop ceilings, acoustical tile. And in turn, my brother and I both now know a lot about, electrical.
My dad built this place. Like everything in here, my dad put up. Sorry,
and
Joe.
your grandfather helped build the building that you work in.
That's right. My dad actually put up all the ceilings, which is cool
a
because
legacy.
when she first got the job, I was like, "Do you know your grandfather?"
Wow.
I probably was there at least helping, even as a kid. He used
That's
to bring me on the
awesome.
job every now and then.
It's a huge campus.
Yeah, it's huge. And so I was in that age and a boy, so I did all the stuff when my father was at work. He'd be like, he'd have a list of stuff
It's a
for
very
me to
sexist
do.
household.
Oh, very, very much so. Especially since Nina now is the favorite. So, and she was doing her school thing, and so I was the one who did all the chores around the house, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Because mowing the lawn didn't take 10 minutes. It took 3.5 hours because I had a rider tractor, and then I had to pull out the,
gosh.
And in the summer when all of my friends are partying or going over, I had to do that. We had a cornfield. We had a garden that was probably 100 feet square, 100 by 100 by, and
Pool to take care of.
so I did all that kind of stuff. And, it taught me so much as I hated every second of it. Now I can,
Literally
do things.
do it all.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I thank them and him in a way.
Yeah.
But not at the time.
No, not at the time. I didn't want any part of it.
You played a lot of sports.
I was very athletic. I went through a chubby stage, as both my daughter and my son hate me for because
Yeah.
they got it.
Bullied.
So we all went through that stage,
Yeah.
but I was very athletic, even young growing up. So
Well, I think this is actually a good transition as to where you think being adopted really warped you. And I know yours isn't as dramatic, but in the sense of your story is traumatic, I think, because your sister was sick and
it impacted the whole family.
yeah,
dynamic.
and I think maybe the adoption was always this is just my opinion, I could be wrong, but I think the adoption was always in the back of your head, and knowing who you are now, you're a very emotionally driven person, and as a young male back then, you couldn't verbalize that. That's not a thing. You can't say those things.
especially in his house.
So I think there's also relations to John was so much older than you, so he was kind of gone, and you were the only male left. So you, aside from, even if you weren't adopted, it would have been that way, but maybe because you were adopted, it was always subconscious. I'm always doing these things. Nina's the favorite. John's kind of off doing his own thing. Then there's Tara, who's sick, and as a male, social, athletic, you were very involved, you were doing all these things, but your parents just weren't around to witness it because of Tara being sick. And I'm sure you connected that subconsciously to being adopted and just feeling neglected.
Well, I think I definitely used the adoption as a reason that things didn't go the way I had hoped them to. I was also very involved in the chorus with school, and so when we would do singing events, or
You were a big baseball player.
I was a pretty good baseball player as a kid. They would never come to the games because this was Saturday games. My dad, was home reading the Bible. So there were a lot of events that happened in my childhood that most parents would come to. Mine didn't. And again, because Tara was in the hospital most of her young life, most of her, she was at least until 30. She just kept, in and out.
Well, Tara was later diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Yeah,
Or
and other
something
things.
similar, yeah.
Right.
She had
And
mental
we're-
illness on top of it.
I mean, my dad, she passed away actually recently, a few months ago.
6 months ago.
But we hadn't seen her in 10 years.
Right.
She just kind of she has schizophrenia. So anyway, she's clearly got a lot going on, and your parents obviously prioritize their sick child.
And as I would have too,
Right.
as we would
Yes.
have. So I don't think I would have done anything different.
Yeah.
But I believe we lost, like, not just me, both my brother and my
Nina
other
has
sister.
stories also. Yeah, that she
We
got
lost our
locked up.
parents to the
Leukemia.
medical, to leukemia, which we all hate
Paid a
that
price for.
happened. But I'm not sure
Right.
any of us would have done any different.
Right.
You know.
Obviously, I'm sure if you guys were in the same situation, every parent wants, especially, I mean, I can't imagine having a sick child,
Me
but
neither.
like
Right.
every parent probably feels that way. Like they
Yeah.
want to prioritize all their children,
Yeah.
but the sick one, like what
The
are you
saying
I mean,
is,
Tara
too.
literally died twice. They brought
Yeah.
her back like
It
on
was
the table
horrible.
or whatever.
You can't
So-
even imagine what it was
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
People say, like, for parents, like, you're as strong as your weakest link. So it's like when you see a child suffering, like, most of your attention goes there because you want to help, you want to make
Sure.
them feel better. And then it's also just when maybe they are feeling better, you want to give them more attention because you want them to enjoy that now. And there's a
And-
lot that goes into that.
And how could you even separate yourself from a child who's sick? You know.
Yeah,
it's-
I can't imagine.
So again, so we blamed, we blamed our parents kind of, but we blamed the sickness terribly for,
Yeah. But you being adopted was just another additive
yeah,
to
yeah. It was something I was easily able to blame.
Yeah.
All the things in my life that weren't going on very well. So, and of course, at the age of 12 is when I started, getting involved in drugs, and so then my life kind of veered off because now I started growing my hair, and I was that child who was
Rocker,
smoking pot,
the rebellious child.
always into music. Now I'm really into music, and so now when my parents looked at me, I probably in their eyes, because they're focused on my sister Tara, it would be like every couple months they would see me, I'd be drastically more different as time went on. And I'm sure they didn't like any of that. So then they would respond to me in a negative way. And of course, at that point, when I was an A student up until freshman year, and then I was on the gymnastic team, and things changed with the girls and drugs. Once you find girls and drugs, it all goes
And
to
your
hell.
best friend.
Yeah, and my best friend Greg, right?
How would you say your family dynamic really was overall, like up until high school?
Up until high school, it was we were close. I mean, we were close. It was very strict. It was a very strict household.
I feel like my dad has those stories, like the typical, I walked to school for 3 miles.
With bare feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Uphill the whole way, both
But
ways.
he did, because if he missed the bus, he was afraid to tell his parents, so
yeah.
he walked.
I would get my ass beat. My
Yeah.
parents would. I'm not any different from a lot of people that grew up
It
in
was
my
generational.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to get
the
hit
belt,
too. I had the shoe, he had the
Yeah.
belt.
I
My
got hit
dad-
with anything my dad could grab.
My dad literally used to say, he was like, I'd get in fights at school, and I knew if I went home and my clothes were all messed up, I was going to get a beating from my brother, and then I was going to get a beating from my other brother, and then my parents were going to see me all beat up, and I was going to get a beating from my parents.
Did he
was
get the
like-
wooden spoon,
Right.
the Italian
Yeah.
family?
And
Oh,
my
yeah.
my noni used to do something where, because she had 10 kids, and she was a little woman, and if the kid ever did something bad, they would run away, and she would just stop. She'd wait months, and then you kind of forget that she was mad. You'd be walking past her, and she'd smack him on the back of the head with a pot.
There you go.
And he was like, "What the hell was that for?" And she's like, "You thought I forgot? I remember. That's for 3 months ago."
Wow.
Yeah, so I've heard those stories as well.
Yeah.
The
And
beatings.
it's not
and
different from from a lot of families, but
Yeah.
I remember every bit of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
He's like, I still think about it. to
But
this
we
day.
were still close. I mean, every year we went on vacation, and that was a fun time usually.
Yeah.
Was Mimi very like,
She was a looker. Everybody looked
She
to
was
her.
very fun. She was musically
Was
inclined.
she like that when you were a
yeah,
kid?
Yeah, she was the personality of the family. My
Yeah.
dad was the rock.
Yeah.
He was very quiet. There wasn't much that I can remember laughing about with my father,
He was
except
dry,
for I have
very
to tell
dry.
the story, and he's gonna attack me at some point. We were at the kitchen table, and the kitchen table when my father, as a lot of people know, hard worker come home, the dinner's got to be not got to be ready, but it should be ready.
Yeah. Fucking
all of us sit down, we say grace, and we all start eating, and we'll talk basically, I guess, about what he did at work or what we did at school. So your typical what you see on TV for whatever. And my dad never was embarrassed. Just wasn't person, that didn't. We're at the dinner table, and my dad lets one rip, and it sounds like this, like that, right? And we're all like. For seconds, 5 seconds. And then my dad goes like that, and we all busted out laughing. That was like the only thing, because what's he going to do? It's all dead quiet, and then that.
Oh my gosh.
So that's one of the things I remember, because my dad actually laughed out loud.
Yeah.
It was one of those things. He had fun when we went on vacation. He knew how to fish. He knew how to hunt. Yeah. He did all that kind of stuff, and he taught it to us. And I enjoyed him a lot when we were doing those things. But when it wasn't that, it was a whole different dad. So
yeah, I feel like mom's parents were kind of like that too. Like
they were more fun, I think, overall.
Like one was the rock and one was the personality.
Your mom was the rock, right? Well, she was personality.
No, she was the personality.
Yeah.
She was the personality. My dad, he was personable with their friend group, but to me, he just went to work every day. My mom used to like to entertain, and she was little. She was like 5 feet tall, max. She was tiny. So, and she liked to drink socially, but it didn't take much for her to get all loopy.
She had a big personality.
Yeah, and she would just get fun. My friends, like my friend Sharon, remembers coming to my house and being like shocked, like, "Oh my God, your mom's drunk," but not in a bad way. Like her friends were there; they were having a party. Her mom didn't have people over and drink together and whatever. Wow. So I mean, that wasn't something that happened every weekend. But yeah, as I got older, I realized that they had fun.
What was expected out of you growing up, like from your parents?
Honestly, like when I was young, I didn't really have chores and things like that. I mean, I had to put things away. My mom was very neat, but she did all the cleaning. We had a cleaning lady when I was older. I did my own laundry. As far as like chores, not a lot. My parents were both very book smart, and I am not book smart. Like, I'm smart, but not.
It's the adoption. That's what it was.
And I think they were frustrated by that. I was someone that struggled in school. Maybe it was an attention thing. I don't know. And that was very frustrating to them that I was not as easily successful at those things. They would pay for tutors and testing. I remember going for testing. That was probably one of the things that the adoption did. Like, they thought there was something wrong with me because I wasn't smart like them.
My pop-up, like, he graduated high school at 16, got a full ride to NYU, went to the military, and then ended up helping create, what was it, the credit card?
The Visa MasterCard program for
billing
Bank
system,
of New
right?
York, I think it was.
He's very smart.
He's a genius.
He's very smart, yeah.
You were like,
And then there's us.
but I can entertain you.
Not
everyone can do that.
No, definitely. My parents can't sing. They couldn't sing or dance. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I always describe my parents, and whenever people ask, like, "Oh, what do your parents do?" I was like, "Well, my dad was an immigrant who worked in cars, and my mom was pretty much like stay at home, and then she does this and that." I go, "We have no doctors and lawyers in my family. Okay, we're all personalities.
There's nothing wrong with that.
arts.
My dad hired everybody to fix things because he couldn't do anything, which is like so different than my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was a terrible cook.
That's too funny.
I didn't know she was a terrible cook, but she was a terrible cook.
My mom was a fantastic cook.
Yeah.
She had jobs.
She was Polish, so she was she knew what she was doing.
She could bake, cook.
We ate.
Wow. Your parenting styles, which I think this is an interesting question of, do you think being adopted affected your parenting styles with your kids? Like, were there things that you were like, I know I'm going to do this with my child? Or did you feel differently because you were like, this came from me? Like, I don't know. Was there any sort of difference, or was it not a thought?
I came out pretty good, so answer freely.
Well, okay.
Backwards, but pretty good.
I mean, I knew that I grew up in a house, and I've said this before, where it was super clean, like a museum, and I did not want my children to grow up like that. And I loved my mom, and our house, I could have people over anytime, day or night. I mean, the house was always presentable. I never had to worry about being embarrassed about our house. But it was to the extreme. And I didn't want my kids to be, I wanted our house to be clean but lived in. So I knew I wasn't going to do that. And I mean, I don't think
Yeah, I
you
don't
ever
think so.
felt
What
pressure
would
to do
annoy
that.
me, and this is not just you, this is just mothers, I think, in that generation. I'd be like, oh, Anna's coming over. And she's like, the house isn't clean. I'm like, it's Anna. We're 7.
Yeah. Well, the other, her mom, they had a
Right.
whole room you weren't allowed
Right,
to go in
right.
or sit on the
Yeah.
furniture.
Well, our house is small. I grew up in a big house, so
Yeah.
in a small house with a lot of toys. Like when you
Right.
guys were young, there was so many toys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the house always seemed like it was cluttered because there was just so many toys. So I'd want to like put the toys away. That's really what it was.
Yeah.
Not that I
Yeah.
thought the house was messy, but there was just stuff around. Up until I was 12, there was plastic on our furniture.
No way.
Yep. Which is
My noni
definitely
had the
Italian.
same thing.
So, Dad,
Yeah.
what is something that you took or didn't take from being adopted?
Parenting style.
Parenting style.
Yeah.
We were actually considering adopting if because you had a couple miscarriages as well. We were very lucky. I mean, we would have been lucky either way, but we were very lucky to have somebody that we could actually call our own, blood related, which was so much.
Oh, yeah, you
meant
were
so
the first
much to
thing that
me.
we knew that was
You were
related
the
to
first
us.
blood relation
awesome.
I ever had,
Or I
knew.
ever had.
My
yeah.
little feels
Knew
the
of,
same
so.
way.
Thanks for welcoming.
No, but that
me
is
in.
true. It was
And-
kind
and
of
we said that.
awe-inspiring. Like,
Alyx
wow.
is the first of our bloodline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, or
That
the,
they
you
knew
know,
of.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, up
That
to
we
that
had
point, of
met.
course.
We had
Right.
never known anybody that was blood related to
Right.
us.
Wow.
Up until that point. So, I don't know if the adoption itself really changed the way I raised you. I think our upbringing, or at least mine, is I reacted in ways that I thought would be better to raise you, like, you know, the
Less chores.
punishments.
I
I
had
mean, I don't
no
think you
chores.
guys were ever grounded, really, for the most part. I was grounded most of my young life.
Me too. I was grounded all the time.
I also don't think I was a bad kid, so maybe I'm just not.
Well,
the
and you
best.
were, and I think I was always lying to my parents all the time because I felt that what they expected was totally ridiculous for somebody who's 12, 13, 14 years old,
So you'd
especially
get
if I
caught
wanted
in
to
the lie.
have girlfriends and do drugs, you know. So, but I think with you guys, we always said that we're going to find out anyway, and we're going to be very mad if we find out. So whatever happens, just tell us, and we'll, you know. So I think we had a very open understanding between
Yeah, but
us
there
and
were
you and
certain
Tommy.
things I would go to a certain parent for. I'm sure
Oh,
everyone
that's okay.
has that.
And that, yeah, that works.
Like
Yeah.
Dad, Mom.
Yeah.
You know how to play each one of us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so did Tommy.
Yeah.
But that's natural.
Right.
You ever do the thing where you're like, well, Mom said. Well,
Oh,
Dad
yeah.
said.
My sister did that with the friggin' bearded dragon we have. Nobody wanted the bearded dragon. She was like, I guess she asked my dad first, and she went to my mom, and she was like, yeah, Dad said it was okay. And my mom was like, and the next thing it was in the house, and both parents were like, I didn't say it was okay. And they're like, but she told me you said it was okay.
Yeah, you did. You
Yeah.
gave the nod.
Yeah. And my sister was just like, quietly walk past.
With the bearded dragon.
This is a live bearded dragon.
Yep. She's still there.
Do you guys want to talk briefly about like how you met your adopted parents? Like what drove you to that?
Mine was first. You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. I never really had too much of a desire to look for my biological parents. I mean, always curious you look like somebody. Really, as I got older, it was more like a health concern, like does breast cancer run in my family? And actually, when Alyx was, what were you, 18, 17,
19?
something like
As a
that, a
sophomore?
young adult, her gynecologist found a lump on her throat and wanted to get it checked out, and asked if cancer ran in our family, and we had no idea because
I loved going to the doctors because you get those long lists, and
Yeah.
I'd be like, I don't know.
can't answer any of them. Right.
I love them too.
Yeah.
But I wish I had known.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. So both of us had no medical history from our families, which made sense because our parents were young. I mean, a 16-year-old is probably healthy if they're having a baby. But anyway, so we couldn't really give any history to the doctor. And she's like, okay, well, you need to see a specialist. And and then Alyx she was concerned, like, well, Mom, like, maybe we should know whether we have cancer in our
Well,
family.
because they were going to do a biopsy and like dig into my neck. And I was like, can we not?
Yeah. So I was talking to my friend Jill about it, and she was like, well, let's do a quick, like, let's see if we can find your bio, Mom, maybe just to get like medical history. So we did like a quick search, and I had very specifics because, like I said, I was born in a private hospital between a doctor and a lawyer. Or like someone would have had to have this very specific information for it to match, not like an adoption agency.
She was black market baby.
Yeah, I was a black market baby, I'm pretty sure. I didn't have a birth certificate.
Wow.
Yeah. I had an adoption certificate, but that's another story. So we actually found someone that like totally matched everything that my parents were told, the person where they were from, the whole 9 yards. So I did not want to reach out to this person because I didn't want them to have my contact information because I was worried. Like my feeling always was, what if you find out your bio family is a shit show? You open up that Pandora's box. Can you ever close it again? Maybe there's things you don't want to know. Like it's very difficult. But I said, okay, we'll do it for the medical things. So my friend Jill actually reached out to, who now I know her name is Jacqueline. I think she sent her an email and said that, I'm contacting you for my friend who believes she's your biological daughter. And of course, Jacqueline instantly responded because apparently she had always wanted to know what had happened to me. And Jill and her corresponded for a few weeks via email because I wanted to make sure she wasn't crazy. And Jill felt that she was great and that I should talk to her. And Jacqueline actually thought that Jill was me all along. She thought that it was just a lie and she was afraid to say who she was. But then she realized that Jill really was not me. So I did reach out to her and we had a lovely conversation and she gave me information, basically told me that everybody was healthy in her family. She really didn't give me a lot. She said her grandmother lived a long time. Her mother was still alive. Her father had died at a young age in his 40s. He had a stroke, I believe. He had heart issues. And
which was right about the time that
which is right around the time that she got pregnant with me. And that I got a lot of backstory from that about why I was really adopted and all of that good stuff. But she gave me information and I thought it was the right information, but it wasn't all the information. In the long run, she's a very nice person. So I don't have a close relationship with her. I chose not to for personal reasons. I wish her only the best. I do reach out to her via text every once in a while just to see how she's doing, wish her well.
Yeah, you follow her on Facebook.
I follow her on Facebook. She follows me. She'll ask me about you and your brother. But my parents were my parents. My mom died, unfortunately, when I was young. I was 22. She was killed in a car accident. And, I have a good relationship with my dad. I only see him a couple times a year, though, because he lives in Florida now. But they were my parents. Like, they raised me. I loved them. I still love them. And
you weren't looking.
I wasn't looking for a mom, and she wanted to be my mom. And she doesn't understand why I don't love her. I appreciate her.
Did you ever find out who your dad was?
No. She thought she knew who my biological father was. She kept in touch with him her entire life, kept telling him that I was his child, begged him to pay to find me. Apparently he was this very wealthy man. And then when I found her, she told me about him. We all did DNA tests. She came back as a 99.9 match. She was definitely my biological mother, and there was zero chance that he was my biological father. And she was devastated. She said, oh no. And he was weird because he wanted me to lie to her and tell her that he was the biological father. I said, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story.
So, So then she claimed that a number of different things could have happened that I became about. So we don't have to get into that, though.
Crazy. Dad?
Well, I got in touch. One of my friends from high school, actually, I always wanted to find who my parents were.
Yeah.
Always.
That was always
it was in the front of you were saying, in the back of your mind. No, my adoption was always in the front. And not always a bad, but it was always there. So when I was an adult for, 18, 19 years old, I went to Spence Chapin. I had a letter that stated I was adopted through Spence Chapin. And I called them at some point and they sent me a bio that about my biological mother and family that she said to them. Mm-hmm. So they had this, I guess, on their file. They sent it to me It basically said all the things that I am. For instance, all the things that my mother was, that they said she was, and all the things that what she said my father was everything I was. I went to go, before I found out any of this, I went to go into the Navy. I loved airplanes. I was musically inclined, blah, blah, blah. I was 6 foot, 170 pounds. My father was brown hair, but he was 6 foot, 170 pounds. He was a gymnast. I was a gymnast. He went into the Navy. I was in the Navy.
Wanted to go into the Navy.
Wanted to go. My mother was blonde hair, so all those things. Put them together, you got me, which is amazing. But
if he does say so himself.
Right. Well, I thought it was neat to put it all together, and there was nothing like he was Chinese, and so after that, I made an appointment to go to Spence Chapin and get more information, and they really wouldn't give me any. And the reason was because I was adopted from New York into New Jersey. My files were closed and sealed.
We both had closed adoptions.
I couldn't even go to a court. I would have had to go to an appellate court in order to get it even processed. But luckily, a friend from high school knew how to find people. That was her thing. She found lost people and
genealogy. She was she did
she
genealogy.
used some of that, but she also had some great investigational skills. Carol Selecki, thank you. So she found I did the DNA ancestry. She found, actually before that, she found a link between my father and my mother connection through high school yearbooks. That's how she was. She did all the
nitty gritty.
Yeah. Then I took a DNA test and found out that this guy was actually my father, and then she was able to dig a little deeper. So when I contacted my mom, I sent her a letter, like a 3-page letter, and I explained everything. And so then she called me. We spoke for over an hour, I think. So it turns out that my mom, I found out that she really couldn't have me and all that. And she has not had any children since. Because of the ancestry DNA, found out that I have 2 half brothers, 1 half sister from so one half brother and 1 half sister from
your dad's side,
from one person that my father married, and then there's another half brother who's adopted marriage, who was like me, I guess an oops baby. So we found the connection.
Also
through that.
named Dave. How weird.
Also
is that?
named Dave.
Wow.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? So, so I've been in contact with my bio mom for 5 years now, I think, and we used to talk every Tuesday or whatever, once a week. Now it's down to once every other week or something. She still lives in Memphis, and she has her thing going on. Yeah. So
it's just funny that neither of your bio moms had any other children.
It is interesting.
Yeah,
yes.
And my dad died in 2011, I think.
Yeah, something
of a heart issue.
A heart issue, yes.
Yeah.
Which is ironic. Thank God now we know. Well, now I'll have medical history to pass on, but
right.
my dad had open heart surgery in February, and
you definitely have heart issues in your family.
Has heart issues.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my half sister had the same thing I had done. She's 2 years younger than me. 3 years ago she had it. So, yes, prevalent. Now we know.
Yep.
Now we know. Okay.
Wow.
To end this, let's ask one last question. Is there anything you'd like to say to those wanting to adopt or to those adopted?
Well, I would say if you want to adopt for whatever reason, I think you should go for it. I think adoption is a wonderful thing, whether it's from a foster care or it's a newborn. If you feel that you can give a good life to a child, there's nothing more special than that. Yeah. As far as advice to people that are adopted, embrace it. Don't look at it as a negative that you weren't wanted. I would look at it like you're special.
Chosen,
yeah. I mean, most of the time when someone feels that they were unwanted, it was just that you were, an oops, it was an unplanned pregnancy. It doesn't mean that you weren't supposed to be here. Just though that person wasn't the person to take care of you at that time. and embrace it. And if you feel it's important to you to find out where you come from, then go for it. Just be prepared for whatever you find. It may be good, it may be bad, it may be indifferent, and don't feel that you owe it to anybody to do anything. You don't have to be committed either way. Once you find your biological family, if you want to be connected to them, then be connected, and if not, not. And as far as the family that adopted you, you should definitely include them in that, because I feel like that can throw people for a loop. Make sure they know that your desire to look for your biological family members is not representative of their lack of love and caring and your connection to them. That it's just, some people feel like they have a piece that's missing. I never felt that way, but I know most adopted people, from my experience in talking to them, feel like, even ones that had great childhoods, feel that they are missing a piece that they need to close the puzzle.
I would agree with all of that. If you're a family that's, I mean, obviously you have to give your own reasons to yourself as to why you'd want to adopt, whatever it may be. But I think once you make that decision, understand that there's a lot more to it than just the decision of, oh, let's adopt. Clearly, you have to understand that you need to accept that child as your own, and not overly. If you have more kids, then you can't, at least that's my opinion. But that child, I think, my opinion is that you need to tell them from the minute that they ask the question. That way the door's open. You can be honest with them. I mean, like you said, Jackie, when 15, when you're 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, when you find out you're adopted.
Shocking.
It's like your whole life is a lie.
Absolutely.
Right.
Then it
like
puts a
trust
damper
issues
on everything.
Right.
So if you just tell them from the beginning, and a lot of people, I guess, are just, they're afraid that they're not going to love me anymore because they now find out and like you said, it's just a little piece that's missing.
Yeah.
There's no difference in love.
Yeah.
My parents are my parents. No different. In fact, they're still more so my parents than my bio mom. My bio mom is somebody who gave birth to me. I appreciate it. I know her as a person now, but she was never my mother and never will be my mother. So that's all. It needs to be out front.
Yeah.
I think as someone who's watched you guys be adopted now parents to someone biological, I think what I've learned as a woman, if I am able to get pregnant, if you are thinking about adoption, or you're young or you're old and you just don't think that you can take care, make the decision to look into adoption. I think that it's almost do yourself a favor and help alleviate something from yourself. If you don't think that's something that you can handle, that's okay. Like, we are not perfect people. Your relationship may not be perfect. Your financial situation may not be perfect, but there are families that would love to have children. So, I mean, if this wasn't the case, I literally would not be here. So, and I know everyone has their struggles with adoption, but like, overall, you guys had great childhood. So I just think really do your homework if you are in a situation. I think adoption is a really wonderful choice and option. And obviously I advocate for it because I wouldn't have this life or this podcast or my little. So.
And just the fact that because I was adopted and so is Risa, we started talking.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That's how
like
we
your
got
literal
together.
relationship was brought
Based
together.
on that.
That is true. We would have no reason to talk. We
Yeah.
had literally nothing in common.
Yeah. It's cute. That's so cute.
I guess to wrap this up, you want to
Yeah.
wrap it up since you...
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you to you guys because I feel like that can be very vulnerable talking about something like that and like, I don't know, putting a camera and a microphone in your face being like, what are your biggest struggles? Like, it's a lot. So I appreciate you guys coming on and being so vulnerable and sharing all that. It's really nice to hear your stories, truthfully. So
well, thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming.
We kind of took over your podcast.
No, that's what we wanted, though. That's what we want. I have nothing to speak of on that. That's if that helps any viewers or listeners in certain situations of their lives, like that's wonderful. So that's the goal, is to bring comfort to others and
I hope
more
it does.
education on it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I hope it does.
Yeah.
So thank you guys again, and I guess we'll see you next week, ladies and gents.
Yes. And don't forget, check out Caesar's Bagels.
Not Palace.
You could check that out too if you wanted, but
Bring Caesar's Bagels to Caesar's Palace.
yes. All right.
Thank you again, and see you next week.
We'll see you next
Bye.
Monday.
Bye.
Bye.